I never doubted my sexual attractiveness. Since I was a teenager, I was always in high demand for dates, at homecoming parties in both high school and college, and I had 3 marriage proposals that I turned down. However, at the age of 31, I, Britt Compton, née Saunders, was experiencing a crisis of self-confidence. I married George Compton 2 years after I graduated from a Big Ten university with a bachelor's degree in communications and a minor in French. George is a very handsome, fit guy and seemed to have a high libido, which I really liked. We talked about having at least 2, most likely 3 or 4 children in time for my 30th birthday, and we both seemed on board with that plan. Our sex life has always been active at least 3 or 4 times a week, often more. My crisis of self-confidence began shortly after my 29th birthday. George began to be less in love, less spontaneous, and less sexually excited. I tried sexy lingerie, aphrodisiacs, weekend getaways, and just about everything else I could think of, including every technique suggested by Cosmopolitan magazine. Everything was unsuccessful. In fact, it was only getting worse, which was driving me into despair. After about a year, it had dropped to once every 2 weeks, and I needed more information and a different approach. During this time, George wasn't nasty, we didn't argue, he said he loved me, I just couldn't turn him on. This period coincided with the fact that it began to seem to me, as it turned out, not entirely correctly, that the attention from other men had also decreased. Although I usually dressed conservatively, I had some very noticeable essays that actually attracted the gaze of all men between the ages of 18 and 80 on the street, in business or in public places. So, I got the impression that they were no longer paying attention to me. I have a high metabolism and have always been reasonably fit, but due to my declining self-confidence, I joined a health club and trained intensely 4 or 5 days a week. 6 months later, looking in the mirror, it seemed that I had become even more graceful than before. I continued the exercises further, despite the fact that my attractiveness to George did not increase at all. It was a good outlet for me. Although, as most people know, working out increased my sexual desires. Around the time I turned 30, I decided to seek advice from friends I trusted. I confided in 1 single and 3 married friends. They were of little use. They either brushed off my concerns or gave completely useless advice. It seemed like they didn't even really understand my problems. Around this time, Jubal Phillips, my brother's best friend from college, visited me. My brother Tim, 2 years older than me, and his wife live in the same city as George and me, and they have 2 children. His friend Jubal is consistently monogamous. At 32, he has been married and divorced 4 times, but has never cheated on his wife. Jubal had been thinking about moving to our area after his last divorce, especially since he was interviewing for a really good job at the same large international corporation that Tim worked for. I've always liked Jubal and had a crush on him for a while. He was a large, strong, and very respectable guy with a rugged appearance that appealed to about half of the female population. I met 2 of his wives and saw photographs of the others. They were all amazingly beautiful. As far as I know, there was no betrayal on either side. According to Jambala, the reason for the divorces was that he had a poor understanding of women and that they all turned out to be losers. I need a stable woman like you, Jubal stated several times while talking to June, Tim's wife. George and I went to visit Tim the first Saturday that Jubal was in town and had a nice time. Us with my Jubal really enjoyed playing with Tim and June's kids, and we even had an impromptu fun game of tag, me and Tim's 8-year-old boy against his 6-year-old sister and Jubal. After the kids went to bed, we 5 adults partied hard, sometimes being amused by Jubal's light-hearted stories about his crazy wives. As George and I were getting ready to leave, Jubal asked me if I knew a health club nearby because he needed a workout, and if his interview went well, he would like to join. I invited him to be a guest at my health club the next day. Jubal actually got his dream job and moved to our city about a month after we met. He moved into an apartment complex that was almost next door to my health club. At his request, I selected several curtains and other accessories for him since I have good taste. I would say we trained at the same time about 3 times a week. About a month later, While we were drinking cocktails after a Saturday workout, Jumbal said, "It's none of my business, but since I like you, Brit, I'll ask you anyway." I was a little puzzled, but I simply nodded and he continued, "Why are you either unhappy or disappointed or both?" This unsettled me, not only because he hit the nail on the head, but also because he was quite direct. Why, do you think that I'm, unhappy or unsatisfied? I faltered, realizing only after a couple of seconds that it was not his word, disappointed, that I had used, but my Freudian word, dissatisfied. Given his raised eyebrow, I think he caught it. Because you are different than before. You're not as confident and laid back as usual. If I'm minding my own business, tell me to fuck off. But if you need someone to talk to, I'm a good listener. Lord knows I've had plenty of practice with my 4 crazy wives. I paused, looking at my cocktail and sipping it, then broke the pause. It's hard to talk about, and I don't feel comfortable talking about it with a man. I talked to 4 friends, and they weren't any help, and my voice just faded away. In fact, if 4 women couldn't help, perhaps a man's gaze will help. "I think you know me well enough to know that I won't talk, judge, or gossip," he said, running his hand over his mouth as if zipping up a zipper. I don't know why I suddenly broke down. I began to sob quietly, holding my head in my hands, while sitting at an outdoor table at Smoothie Place. Jubal silently cleaned up after us, gently took my hand, and led me to his car. He sat me in the front passenger seat, rolled up the windows, and turned on the air conditioning. "Okay, lay it out," he commanded as soon as the air conditioner started working at full power. "I can't," I almost sobbed. "Let's," he insisted. I took a deep breath, pulled myself together, and said, "I have lost my sex appeal. George is completely uninterested in having sex with me. Guys don't look at me the same way they used to, and I just feel worthless." Jubal laughed. This scoundrel really laughed. I got really angry, slapped him, and yelled, "This is not funny." I tried to open the car door, but he turned on the child lock, gently grabbed me by the shoulder, and said, "Sorry, please listen to me." The laughter was inappropriate, but I find it hard to believe that the sexiest woman I know is so insecure. I looked closely at his face, and it seemed to me that he suddenly realized that he had called me the sexiest woman he knew, and he wanted to take it back. However, instead, he took it lightly and said some funny nonsense, as if he thought I was joking, etc. I finally calmed down. I just don't have a solution. I often think that maybe I need an honest assessment of my sex appeal to help me overcome my demons. Even if I look good and have the right outfit, I must be a really bad lover if George shows no interest in me. We talked for another 20 minutes or so, with him asking serious questions about why I felt this way and me giving mostly honest, if incomplete, answers. Finally, he said, "I'll think of something. I want to help, Brit." "Thank you for listening, Jubal," I said, getting out of the car. "It really helped me speak out, and I'm sure you will remain silent, even with Tim and June." "My lips are sealed," he repeated, smiling. Almost every time Jubal and I practiced at the same time, he would give me one piece of advice or another. As a joke, he even once handed me a fake business card, obviously made on a computer printer, with the inscription, "Jubal Phillips, sex attractiveness expert. To get an opinion, just show up naked at," giving the address of his apartment. "Reasonable prices starting at $100 an hour." When I first appeared to have a shocked expression on my face, he laughed. After my few weeks without sex, Jubal said, "It's time for you to deal with George. There are a number of possibilities. He's sick and doesn't know it. He's seriously sick and afraid to burden you with it. He's having an affair. He's decided he's gay, or maybe a few of these. In any case, you should know, because you are driving yourself crazy. Meet him face to face. Immediately." I tried to avoid confrontation, but I needed to hear this advice from someone I respected. I promised Jubal that I would do so. It took me 2 days to gather my courage. Then, on Friday night, I got home before him, but didn't cook dinner. When he came in, I said sternly, "Sit down, George." "How are you, honey?" he said defensively. "I can't live like this any longer. We haven't had sex in over a month. You have no sexual or romantic interest in me even though I've tried a dozen different things. And I don't think I'm so ugly or undesirable that you should avoid any sexual contact with me. What happened? I want an explanation, and immediately." For the next 15 minutes, George tried to refute me. I gave no mercy. He began to sweat heavily. Finally, he lowered his head into his hands and, without looking at me, said, "About 2 years ago, I finally began to admit to myself what had been gnawing at me for most of my adult life. Although I believe that I still like women, although our experience would seem to disprove this, I have a strong attraction to men. Have you ever acted on it?" I asked, with much less venom or shock than I expected. Still, Jubal's words prepared me, among other things, for this. Yes, a couple of times. Suddenly, everything in the world became clear to me. My last words as I stood up to leave were, "And you're too cowardly to tell me and instead just let me suffer?" He raised his head mournfully. "I'm sorry, Britt, but I didn't hear the rest because I was already in the garage with the car keys. I backed into the driveway and called Jubal. He answered after the second ring. "Hi, Britt," he replied. "How are you?" "Are you busy now?" "No, nothing important." "Are you alone or with someone?" "One." "I'll be right there." When Jubal opened the door to his apartment, he had a strange expression on his face. After that, I couldn't really see his face because my eyes were closed as I pressed my lips hard against his. After we had an amazing kiss that lasted at least a couple of minutes, I broke it off. At this moment, a confused smile appeared on his face. "George is gay," I muttered, kissing his neck again. "I hope you're ready to have sex with me because if you're not, I'll rape you," I growled, trying to unbuckle his belt with one hand, my blouse with the other. Neither one nor the other worked. Jubal solved the problem. My blouse was torn off. He quickly took care of my bra. He pulled down my shorts with both hands, pulled down my boxers, and stepped out of them, as he was barefoot. As soon as his hands were free, he just as quickly dealt with my clothes, alternating kisses all over my body, carried me, and plopped me down on the bed. For the next quarter of an hour, he made up for my lack of sex until I screamed. Finally, we broke away from each other and stared into each other's eyes with sly grins. Jubal grinned. "My expert assessment is that you are certainly the best in my experience. So good, in fact, that I'm not even going to charge you for the evaluation." I playfully poked him in the ribs with my fist. "Well, I'm not as categorical as you. I think I'll need another 100 or so before I can properly rate you, although it's looking good so far." I didn't leave his apartment that weekend. Jubal came over to my house when I knew George wouldn't be there and brought me some clothes, since he ruined most of what I was wearing on Friday, and my laptop. Monday morning at breakfast, as Jubal was serving me some French toast, he casually asked, "So, are you moving? Well, you have a say. But if you don't kick me out, I'll be here tonight and every night until you last, or make me wife for 5. I replied casually, stuffing my mouth with French toast. "Sounds like a plan," was his equally nonchalant response. "Oh, by the way, I'm meeting with a family law lawyer this afternoon. That is, divorce. I made an appointment on Friday in anticipation of breaking up with George. Things can progress really well and quickly if you are motivated enough and know what you want. Before our weekend away, I thought that Jubal and I had hit it off and might be right for each other. After the weekend, I was sure that I felt not only lust for him, but also love. Apparently, he felt the same way, because by the next weekend, we had moved my things into his apartment and some into storage. On Monday, I saw Sally Mission, the lawyer. She served George on Tuesday in his office. George wanted to talk as Jubal and I were moving the last of my stuff out. I didn't mind. His part of the conversation was happy nonsense about how he might just be going through a phase and would want to have sex with me again in the near future. That dividing our assets wasn't a good idea. That he had only been with another man for 3 times. After I finally broke up with George, I didn't ask for any alimony even though he made about $15,000 a year more than me. I could wait until he sold the house to get his half of the equity, so the divorce went through without any major problems and without delays. The weekend after the divorce, Jubal took me to a 4-star resort for a week. We had a fantastic time out of bed, and in bed it was otherworldly. By then, our bodies and libidos were completely attuned to each other, and each session was better than the last, no matter how impossible it seemed. However, I messed up my birth control, and about 4 months after my divorce was final, I went to my OB/GYN and confirmed what a home test had already shown. I was about 7 weeks pregnant. I returned home that evening and laid out all the information after I treated Jubal to one of his favorite foods. "Okay, dude," I said. "It's time to push yourself. We need to buy a house. We'll start by visiting the ones I've circled on the real estate pages. Then we need to talk about baby names and buy some furniture." "Why do we need this?" he asked calmly, having already familiarized himself with the results of a home pregnancy test. "Because you fooled me with your animal magnetism? I screwed up my birth control, and today my doctor confirmed that the home pregnancy test was accurate. That's why, dude." "So, I guess you think I'll marry you," he said with a devilish grin. "You're lucky, 4-time loser. The only reason I would marry you is to find a living father for my child." I giggled. "Tell me, oh great goddess of fertility, will you marry me, despite the fact that I have lost 4 times? After a long pause, during which I pretended to weigh my options, I said, "Okay, since you asked so kindly." He got married. I got married. The night I first became pregnant was 8 years and 3 children ago. I've already almost doubled the time he's been married to me compared to his other 4 wives combined. Jubal is still monogamous, and I no longer doubt my sexual attractiveness. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.